Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberly Dondo, and in today's episode, I'm joined by our amazing editorial team, well, part of our amazing editorial team for our end of month podcast. So before we get started, I'm just going to let everyone else introduce themselves. Dan, do you want to start?
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Cooper. I'm the news editor at Money Marketing.
Hi, I'm Maria Nichols, features editor at Money Marketing.
And I'm Amanda Newman-Smith, feature writer.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining me today. So before we kind of get into May, let's talk a little bit more in depth about April and everything that you covered in April that was fascinating or scandalous. I don't know. Amanda, do you want to start us off?
Okay, yeah. Well, I was really personally invested in this feature that I wrote for it's the In Focus. It's diversity in the recruitment process, because I often come across advisors who say to me, we really want to be diverse. Our doors are open to everybody, but we're just not getting the applicants through. And I just thought, to me, like coming from a working class background where, we didn't know what financial advisors were sort of back then. And it just seems to me that you need to kind of cast your net more widely. So, the obvious thing is like job adverts, if you sort of place it, I don't know, in the posh papers, what I mean, like, yeah, certain kind of person's going to see it. And I started this article with a quote from someone I spoke to, Natalie Richards, who is Chief Executive of CEO London. I'm sorry, SEO London, my mistake there. That's a diversity in education and training charity. And she told me during the interview, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And I just thought that really sort of summarises the issue here. If you kind of look in the same kind of places for candidates, then, don't be surprised when the same kind of people walk through the door. So I've been in this article, I've been looking at, how things like language, wording of job adverts can sort of, put people off, because one recruitment consultant told me, if you kind of, put language like, competitive, driven, whatever, they're not necessarily gendered terms. Women can be competitive, driven, whatever, but statistically speaking, it does kind of appeal to more men. And you might find that however good a woman is at her job, she might be put off by this environment. Another person told me, you only apply for a job when you think you're going to fit in. And I think that's kind of why it kind of, if you put this kind of, I suppose, excessively salesy kind of culture, then it can put people off, not just women, but, it can put sort of other people off. And I just think, firms need to probably take a bit more care, where they kind of advertise, or, where they look for new candidates, and how they're sort of couching those terms, and also accessibility. Because as well, like, if you're disabled or whatever, or you've got some sort of impairment, there are you need a bit of help in accessing things sometime. And it would be good if people could sort of put together some, I don't know, dyslexia friendly materials or something, to kind of widen that net a bit. Because, they're all sort of, seems to me everyone's sort of scratching their heads going, I don't know why I'm getting, same sort of people through the door. Do my best, we welcome everybody, but, it's just not happening. So,
well, I think, isn't it that saying that's like, if you do the same thing over and over again, it's like a sign of madness, like you're not going to get different results. So I can only imagine that if you put out the same traditional kind of job advert, and I have to say a lot of like job adverts, they do tend to use language where you're like, I don't even know if I have that skill, or the way that it's worded, it makes it sound more higher level than it actually is. Maybe they're actually just asking for someone who can use Excel and put in numbers, but they've worded it in such a way that makes it seem like it's a super tricky technical mathematic thing.
Exactly. No, I agree with you then. Sometimes job title, I mean, this is probably going off the point for financial advice, but sometimes job titles can be very, like, they seem quite highbrow, don't they? And you look at that and think, oh my God, like I'm way off that. But when you boil it down, it's probably something you could do.
Yeah, I think also I used to work for an HR magazine, so we would talk a lot, and the way that they tried to, I don't know, spice up an HR job title role was always so funny. It was like head of people or something like that.
Yeah.
Just to and then it just made me think that if you're searching for that type of job, how are you going to find it if it says head of people? Because I didn't type in that I'm
To
looking
be
for.
head of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is that aspect where I think a lot of different companies now are trying to change the names of traditional job titles and make them sound, I don't know, like more cool and fun. But it might mean that you're missing out on a great pool of people that aren't looking into that.
No, agreed. And can I make one final point on that? If you really don't know where to start, I've been told, organisations can help. I mean, the one that comes to mind is Kaleidoscope, the disability charity. They're working with SJP on, sort of placing candidates and that sort of thing. So, there is help out there. And SEO London as well do that. So they've got they know sort of talented people who could be really good in your organisation. So, I'd say look around for organisations like that if you're really struggling.
Mm-hmm. And Maria, was there anything in April that stood out for you?
I think big talking point at the moment is the UK ISA, and I wanted to have a look really about some of the pros and cons there. I mean, as we all know, it was announced in the budget in March, but obviously since then there's been more analysis and reaction to come, which has been interesting. I think it's fair to say that there's not a lot of supporters. I think, the majority are kind of thrashing it really. But last month we had a really interesting column written by Quilter Chief Executive Steve Levine. And there were some numbers in there that I hadn't seen before, which I thought were really interesting. So he points to the figures that were bandied around in the run up to the budget, suggesting that the ISA could raise 200 billion for UK PLC over 5 years. Sounds really impressive. I think the idea behind it is really laudable, but he has run some analysis on this and he says it's a ridiculous overestimate and very misleading. And the reason being, so I'm just going to read out this paragraph. It relies on the idea that if cash savers invested 5,000 into UK companies, it would deliver that sum. This assumption draws on FCA data indicating 8.4 million people possess 10,000 or more in cash assets available for investment. So if each were to invest 5,000 in the UK ISA, it could potentially generate 210 billion over 5 years. So that's saying that 10,000, they've still got 10,000 left in their ISA to use. Who's to say that's going to go to UK? So when you look at it like that, I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that politicians.
It makes it's a callback to that Brexit bus with the amount of money that would go back into the NHS. It's giving that very much. That's when you look at it, it's are these people actually of that percentage of people that could put that 5,000? How many of them will choose to allocate their assets into that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that another figure that struck me was only 15% of ISA investors are maximising their contributions at the moment. So there's only 15% of ISA investors. I mean, how many people in the country aren't investing in ISAs? And then only 15% of that are at the 20,000 limit. So I think he said, it could potentially generate around 8 billion annually. So which is no small sum, but it's all a bit misleading. At the end of the day, they're only shooting themselves in the foot, really, because
I think they want to at this point.
That's it. I don't know what they're trying to prove. But anyway, so that was quite interesting to come from him. I also just wanted to flag up next month our senior reporter Lois Vallely. She's written a really interesting kind of comeback to this. Not comeback, but she's presenting the other side of the argument. And I think that's really interesting. So she's saying, don't knock it till you've tried it, basically. Specifically, as an independent advisor, be careful showing your hand too early because you have to be seen to take on whole of market. And the product itself, the UK ISA, it's still under consultation. So, we don't know what's going to come out. It might be positive. She's basically saying, should we give it a chance? So that's really interesting. It's actually one of the only kind of positive spins that I've seen on it. I mean, yeah, trust Lois to come up with the controversial viewpoint of it. But yeah, I don't know. What do I think? I think will we even see the light of day of this product? You know, we're in general election year, it's still under consultation, so this could all be completely futile. We're seeing lots and lots of talk about it, but it could all be futile. It is confusing. There's an awful lot of ISAs out there now. You know, even as someone in the industry, it just blows my mind a little bit and makes it all seem a little bit off-putting. So what's to be said for, you know, your standard person in the street? But yeah, I don't know.
It does make me think back to 2018, I think, when the Lifetime ISA was introduced, and a lot of people were also very skeptical of that, and they thought it was like some commiseration thing, and it wasn't really going to be super effective for a lot of people. They didn't think it was going to be a product that people took advantage of. But I've seen a lot of people use it, mostly because of the fact that if you're someone like me, you have a tendency to put stuff in savings and then be like, oh, actually, I really want to spend money on this, and then end up pulling out of it. Whereas, you know, there's restrictions with the Lifetime ISA. You can only take out once you're, you know, purchasing a home, or I can't remember what the other thing is, but you can only take it out once. So
they helped to buy ISA. They helped to buy ISA. I mean, that really that helped me buy. you know, like that was absolutely brilliant. But that was beneficial to the saver, same as the Lifetime ISA. It's beneficial to the saver. What benefits is the saver going to get from the UK ISA? You know, in actual fact, you could say from the opposite side, should there be concerns of investors kind of being forced into investing into a subpar market, which the UK is. So.
But I mean, I understand the concept behind it, like putting more money into UK businesses will help the economy. But I think someone made a point that like a lot of UK businesses aren't just UK based, they're also international. So you know,
we think HSBC, for example, you know, one of the biggest UK entities, but derives, I think it was 80% of its profits from overseas. So you know, that's one of the things that's under consultation, what is going to constitute as a UK company. And actually coming from that consultation, there may be, you know, it may be beneficial to smaller UK companies, and you know, that's great, but yeah, we'll just have to see on that. There's loads of alternatives. I think, you know, like you just said, the idea of boosting UK investment is a great idea, but is there better ways that it could be done?
Some people have been pitching that, like, pensions, you know, maybe they could drive more of their investments directly to UK companies. Like, that makes sense. That's a big pool for money that's just there.
House reforms, isn't it? Yeah.
But hey, I don't know. I don't make these decisions.
What do we know?
What do we know? We just write about it. But Dan, what about you? You were part of the duo that wrote the April cover.
The April one was just me, and the May one was myself and Lois on a joint effort. Yes. No, that's fine. I can't take all the credit for me. But the April cover. I came into this podcast saying I'm not going to bang on about pensions. I'm not going to mention pensions. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to mention pensions. But yeah, no, it's the April cover really was just looking at the sort of the pensions crisis that we find ourselves in at the moment. And you know, although it's kind of not a new issue, it's been something that's been spoken about for a fair few years now. Just that we've really kind of hit a crisis point, and where do we go from here? Because some of the stats are quite frightening, really. I think it was 3.5 million working age people aren't saving anything at all into their pension, and then 61% of people are saving below the 8% that is recommended. and then 87% of people who are saving less than 15%. So it's obviously the stats are quite alarming, but it's kind of, well, where do you go? Where do you go from here? What do you do next? So it was just exploring that really, and looking at perhaps, you know, the option to look at other countries. I think the likes of the Netherlands, that they've consistently kind of topped the pensions tables in terms of you know, value. So it's maybe looking at some inspiration from abroad and where we can maybe apply that here somehow. The other argument is kind of the auto enrollment and whether it's time for an auto enrollment review. You know, although it's working really, really well, and it's getting millions more saving than it was previously, it's as I said, it's not kind of going far enough. But it's that difficult balance between you know, we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and you know, a lot of people just don't have that disposable income to put more money aside. You know, they're using it for day-to-day living. And I think in fact, one of the stories we did recently was that you know, more and more people are actually using their savings to help with the cost of day-to-day living. So it's just a question of how do we get people saving more money? It's like the £1 million question at the moment. So that was kind of that was one of the things that stood out for me in April. The other ones I wanted to mention were a story that a leader that our senior reporter Mamadou wrote around income protection, and how the you know, traditionally they're sort of seen as the protection underdog in recent years, with you know, sales not being particularly high, but it's kind of seen a bit of a resurgence and recently, and you know, a lot of that is down to sort of post-COVID rise in sickness. That was one of the factors that Mamadou looked into, and how I think it was 2.1 million adults were economically inactive pre-pandemic, and it's now sort of 2.8 million in 2003. So it's gone up by 700,000, you know, sort of post-COVID, and that's one of the factors where, you know, IP sales are kind of really booming at the moment. Other issues, you know, other sort of factors are the consumer duty, and just that people are kind of shouting about income protection a bit more now.
Yeah.
But they were sort of two of the main stories for me that stood out in April.
I never know.
Interesting. So I was just going to say, it's so interesting looking at the contrast of those two stories. So yeah, you know, we're saying the cost of living crisis, no one can spare a few, and we feel it. No one can spare those few extra pounds for pensions, or to put away for pensions. But actually, that IP is, I think it must be one of the only financial products that are seeing an upward trend, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's interesting. You going back to pensions as well. It's
I think maybe it might relate to that thing that Lois talked about, where, you know, envisioning your future self is very difficult. So I can't see myself, like, my parents are almost in their 60s, but I can't see myself at their stage, because I honestly, looking at the state of the world, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if we have another 20 years on this planet, but so I think maybe sometimes it's difficult to be like, oh, I'm gonna put extra aside for my retirement, because you don't know if that will be a possibility, or you might just be like, it'll work out, something will happen, someone will have to look after me. But I think when it comes to income protection, maybe the fear of what happened during COVID made it a reality that this could be something that happens at any point in the near future. So you're able to envision that more, where you're like, I need to make sure that I have a backup now. As opposed to.
Yeah, it's just kind of put that at the forefront. I think COVID, like you say, Kim, has put that at the forefront of people's minds now, hasn't it? Where perhaps they weren't thinking about these issues before, but, you know, it's become more apparent now, and more. Yeah, I need to kind of put steps in place to help.
Yeah, I think they just need to remarket pensions and make it like.
I can't understand.
Make it work, Kim. That's the million.
I don't make it so that people understand the necessity of it, and be like, if you don't, like how a lot of advisors always say when they use cash flow modeling, that's when their clients are able to understand in 20 years, if I do this with my money, this is where I'll be. I think if everyday people who might not have a financial advisor were able to have that like graph that showed if you add just an extra 20 quid, or I don't know how much, this is where you'll be at in 2040. I think maybe that might help a little bit.
I think what's really difficult is, I don't know about you, but so I look at my parents and that generation of the people that I know, and we're seeing, like, God, we've got family friends, they're on holiday. I mean, they're on serious holidays. They're in their 60s every month because of massive DB pensions and massive property price increases. So that's what we're seeing. So it's that whole kind of, making it real, making it tangible for us. We can't, it's hard to see how difficult life is going to be. And also they've got state pensions at, much younger than what we can expect and what our generation and future generations can expect. So it's that making it tangible, isn't it? Because at the moment, I guess it's kind of a human nature thing to think, oh, we'll be fine because they're fine and they're having a great time. And even if they haven't got those massive, final salary pensions and they're not on all these retirement holidays and cruises, they're comfortable because they're they're sitting on an asset. Well, most people are sitting in an asset worth, more than we
millions. Can ever. Yeah, that's so true. That is probably it. Like where I'm like, I can't really envision like where my parents are, because they're comfortable, they're fine there, and they will be fine. And they had kids, so that's also, in my culture, that's like your retirement.
Oh, really?
Essentially, like my grandparents, they never had a pension in Zimbabwe. Like they didn't put money aside for their retirement. Their retirement was on my dad's side, there are 9 kids, and on my mom's side, with my grandma, my mom's mom, they had 5 kids, and then my granddad had a second wife, so he has more kids. So he was like, I'll always be fine. Like my kids are all gonna come together. And it's true, because my dad and his siblings all helped to look after my grandparents, who are still living. And when my mom's parents were still alive, they were also being looked after by her and her siblings. So I mean,
interesting.
Yeah, I guess that was like the old form of a pension. But now, as we move away from that kind of community-based living where it's more independent in Western cultures, we all now have to think more about that. But I think there's a part of me that's always like, I'll just go back home and live on the farm if it's really that bad.
Sounds like a plan. But I do agree with what you're both saying, Kim and Maria. I mean, just a way of, I know this is kind of being done more now, but a way of just simplifying it, saying, you need X amount, to retire comfortably or moderately, or however you want to phrase it. This is the amount you need. This is how much you need to put by per month, and this is when you need to start. I'm sure this is being done more and more, but that was one of the things we kind of looked at in the April cover was kind of how much money you need for each of those things. I think it was the PLSA who released their retirement living standards report, which I think is an annual report. And for a minimum standard of living in retirement, I think a single person needs 14,400 a year. For a moderate, it's 31,300 a year. And for a comfortable retirement, it's 43,100 a year. So, and that the comfortable one includes a subscription to a streaming service. Regular beauty treatments, a foreign holiday, and several UK mini breaks a year. So
that's
if you're talking about so 43,000 pounds a year is what you need.
Oh man.
It made me laugh at the allowance that they gave for food though on those PLSA. It was certainly like the food spend that they've put down was like double what I spend for a family of 4 each week.
Yeah, but maybe they're doing that like with inflation and how much food might cost and like shipping and stuff, because not a lot, especially in the UK, not a lot of it is like locally sourced. I don't know.
Or they just say something on lobster and caviar 3 times a day.
Sorry.
Oh man. Oh, Dan, now you just made me think either I have to downsize my skincare products or
sorry. Put a downer on your Wednesday. Sorry, Kim.
Yeah, that's yeah. Or now I just have to get into hustle culture and I have to hustle more, have multiple streams of income so I can do this comfortable retirement saving.
Well, apparently, if you want to be I think I've mentioned this in a previous podcast. So again, I probably sound like a broken record, but if you want to be a pensions millionaire, i.e., have a £1 million pot to retire with, I think they worked out that you need to save £440 a month from your early 20s.
Oh my god!
Oh wow, I missed the boat.
Missed the boat. I've long missed the boat, honestly. Long missed it.
Okay, well, apart from maybe playing the lottery, I don't know. Probably advisors will be like, no, don't waste your money. But maybe let's look forward to May. So coming back to you, Amanda, I know that you had some things that you wanted to talk about from April, but I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit and then we can get into May.
Oh, I can do. Okay. I'll just sort of talk about one other feature. I looked at, should new entrants to financial advice self-fund their exams. I thought this is a really interesting one because it's common now to join a firm as an administrator and whatever, sort of get on that career pathway and your firm will pay. And this seems a kind of great thing to do, but not everyone does that. So I did some, looking at people who self-funded and why, and it was interesting that one of the reasons that came out was control. You get more control over your own destiny, I suppose, if you self-fund, because you could work for a firm who decides you're not ready, or they maybe don't have the money at that precise moment, or you're in a queue, or whatever the reason might be, and they might just say, we'll sort of put you through your exams in 6 months' time or whatever. But if you're sort of desperate to do them and you want to get on, it's probably not the greatest thing to be told, because one of our new columnist, Maria Taylor Beavis, is going to be writing for us, isn't he?
Yes.
I had a chat with him, and he's a very entrepreneurial kind of person. He always has been, and he put himself through his exams, and that was the very reason why. He was told, if you join us, we won't kind of put you through your exams straight away. And he was like, yeah, but I want to do it now. And it's interesting to kind of see his viewpoint, because he was also saying that he set up his own business, and he was saying he'd met people that didn't have the sort of steeliness and grit that he has, and it's almost like having to self-fund it, you kind of become like that, because you've kind of made it on your own, as opposed to having it done for you. So I thought it was a really interesting, because with my journalism exams, I self-funded my way through, but I was on a course with people who were part of big newspaper groups that got funded for it. And I remember sort of looking at them, and I'm not saying they sort of didn't take it, they did take it very seriously. They had jobs and whatever, but I think we were very different beasts. So I think can't really sort of say any more than that, but yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, looking at the way you write, it's evident, but I think I can relate to that with like my undergraduate degree, which I got a student loan, and student loans aren't like, they're not like American student loans where it's crippling or anything. So I just did my undergraduate, and then when I was done with it, I was like, I'm not that interested in pursuing this as a career. But then when I went and did my master's, it was something that I had to self-fund. And I think I took it much more seriously because I was self-funding it, first of all.
Yeah.
And also it just meant that I felt like I had to get out there and really show myself and do the work, because it was something that I was I was investing in myself for. And I think when you're investing in yourself, you believe it more. I think maybe something about that mentality of like, I'm investing in myself, I'm betting on myself, so I'm going to follow through with this.
So yeah, no, I totally agree. I definitely agree because yeah, there was sort of, I did the same thing as you basically. Undergraduate, yeah, it was loan driven, whatever, but yeah, had to pay for myself for the other one, and it does focus the mind a bit. You're like, you know, if I sit and waste, it was only a 9-month course I went on. It was like if I waste even a month, I'm wasting my own money on this. So it kind of focused the mind, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
no more like going to the pub afterwards or anything.
Well, exactly.
It was like, I'm going home to do my assignments.
Yeah, but having said that, I suppose I want to make the point as well on that you know, if times are financially tough now, so if you can get it paid for, I don't blame anyone for doing it because you know it's a different time, compared to when I was studying, whatever. So if you can get it paid, why not? So you know that's the other thing to put in there.
I mean, I had both sides where the first half of my master's I paid for, and then I came across like a bursary that was being awarded, and then I applied and I managed to get it, so then I was able to pay off the kind of money that I'd taken out to pay for the first half of my master's, and I was like, yes. But also but I still, again, there was something that I really wanted, I invested, so I really worked hard. But yeah, definitely go out there, Google, find ways to help with that funding. It'll also ease that burden of feeling like I have to work alongside doing this, which might be difficult, especially if you're an advisor doing exams, having to also like maybe have a full-time job alongside it. It might mean that you'll end up taking longer to qualify.
Yeah, it's all a balancing act, isn't it? And finding what's right for you. But shall I talk about May now? Because I probably need to talk about May. I'm just going to sort of touch very briefly on what I'm doing in May. I'm looking at how advisors can tap in the market for grey divorce. Now, grey is defined by Legal & General as over 50, and as I creep closer to that age myself, I'm like, I'm not grey, but
grey. I thought it meant like grey area. like you want a divorce but you're not sure. I don't know.
No, grey hair, Kim, you're too young to have that. But yeah, grey hair.
I want grey hair.
There is that. I'm also doing something on whether there's a place for transactional advice, one-off advice, back in the old days kind of thing. So now with the shift towards financial planning and long-term relationships, do advisors want to engage on a one-off basis? If they do, how can they, or do they just sort of turn these clients away? So I'm looking at that. And also a bit of a sort of sad subject as well for the In Focus on vulnerability. I'm looking at cognitive decline and got some quite sort of personal experiences in there which just sort of make you stop and think. So yeah, it's not an easy read, I don't think, but it needs to be said. So
yeah,
that's what I'm doing in May.
It is a lot of people's realities, having to deal with family members who might be going through that, and also having to deal with like the paper side as well as the emotional side of it, I think is a lot. But yeah, it should be very interesting to read. So look out for that. Back to you, Maria. Is there anything that you wanted to highlight for May?
Yeah, I mean, as usual, we've got our excellent columnists covering a range of topics. Just going to flip through now. So we've got Robin Powell, an important warning on new active ETFs. Yeah, that's really interesting because there's been a burst of these active ETFs, and yeah, he's just as always casting a thorough analytical eye over it. We've also got a piece from advisor Tom Morgan about setting up his own company, so breaking free of dubious vertical integration and doing things my way. So there's some kind of insight into why he didn't like some of these big advice what are they called? Big advisor firms, the vertically integrated firms. And then we've got a piece from Brian Burns, who's head of personal finance at Moneybox, and he's looking at the advice guidance consultation and saying how industry players, companies are going to have to put commercial interests on the back seat to get this right. So yeah, as always, some really good comment pieces worth checking out.
Exciting. And Dan, back to that cover that you and Lois worked on.
Yeah, it was we started something a little bit different for me, and it was kind of in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month. So we looked at there were a few reports before the end of the year about advising mental health, and the fact that a lot of them are at breaking point. And a big part of that, although you can't attribute it completely to regulation, is regulation. We've obviously had Consumer Duty under a year ago, and it kind of feels like since Consumer Duty's come in, the FCA have really kind of been going for it. They've been hitting it hard, and obviously regulation is important, and it plays a big part in edging out the bad eggs as such. It's it's having a huge impact on advisors' mental health, and a lot of them, as I said, say they're at breaking point because of it. And there was a study recently, I think it's from the LANCAP, which stated that the fear of more regulation is keeping a third of advice business owners awake at night. So it's just really looking at the regulation, that's the regulatory changes and the proposals that have come in over the last kind of 6 to 9 months, and the impact that's having on people. So we Lois spoke to quite a few advisors on this, and we got some really kind of quite candid first-hand accounts of the personal struggles that many of the advisors are facing. And particularly kind of the smaller to medium-sized advice firms, where they're under that constant pressure to keep up with the regulatory changes, but also the cost of implementing that and the extra kind of paperwork and hours that goes into doing that. So quite a powerful cover feature, I think, and it's just kind of looking at what can be done, and one of those things, because we kind of initially went on the regulation line, and that plays a big part in the cover feature. But one kind of unexpected thing that came out of the phone calls was a lot of the perhaps sort of more senior advisors who were around pre-RDR, perhaps fair to say from the conversation we had, feel like they're perhaps struggling a little bit more with the regulation. Whereas a lot of the advisors coming into the industry, the thing that they said they're really struggling with more than most is the how close advice can get to therapy.
Okay.
So there was kind of the regulations, one part of it, and the other part is kind of these conversations that
you have to get
their clients,
psychology degree to talk to.
Exactly, and unlike counsellors and therapists who are kind of trained to
compartmentalize
exactly and deal with these conversations, and advisors don't really have that training, and so a lot of them are going into the profession and having these really kind of quite upsetting conversations sometimes around around sort of divorce and death and illness and so on, and sometimes they can be the first person to speak to that client about their issues. So it was just the second part of the feature is kind of looking at, well, what else can be done to I guess help advisors with that and kind of build more resilience and prepare them for those difficult conversations. And one of the things we're looking at is some of the professional bodies such as the CLA and so on, whether they can implement some kind of training courses into their or segments into their training just specifically to kind of deal with this issue.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the crux of the May cover.
Maybe they need to like set up like a company or something, or a service where advisors can then, after they've had like an intense meeting with their clients, then they can talk about it with a client. But then regulation, would they be allowed? Well, you can be like, oh, I had this really difficult day and difficult conversation. You don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but yeah, because I feel like in other professions, like I'm sure that when doctors are having to, and nurses and all medical practitioners, when they're having to break bad news, I think they probably do get that support to be like, if you need to talk to someone. Yeah, I never thought about that. But
no, it's just a side of it that I kind of never thought about really either until the conversation started. I was like, actually, they kind of, you can kind of see that really with the conversations that some advisors have. But yeah, it's it's interesting thing going forward. I know more's being done, and there are a few kind of webinars coming up about it and about how to deal with those conversations. But yeah, it's just something to sort of think about for the future, really.
Yeah. Well, we can look forward to that in May. Unfortunately, one thing we cannot look forward to in May is Money Marketing Interactive Leads, which, if you don't know, has now been postponed to the 24th of October due to the railway strikes that are happening. All 3 lines that could possibly lead to leads have all been put on strike on that particular day. I don't know what luck we have, but yeah, I guess it just means that we have more time to marinate and make sure that it is the best event that it can be. And we hope that you are still with us and can come and join us and listen to some really engaging conversations. We're going to keep working on that agenda and make sure that it's up to date and everything that everyone wants to hear about when we are in Leeds. We also have Money Marketing Interactive London, if that would be closer for you. So that will also be happening in October as well. And we also have our amazing, fabulous awards in September. So look out for that. We're going to have a top heavy end of the year. But I guess that just means we're going out with a massive bang for 2024. But yeah, thank you all for joining me today for today's end of month podcast. I really enjoyed this chat. And I will see you next month.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye. Bye.